don't rot overnight, you know. It fades. Slow. Silent. Sweet. Like poison in the ink.
Yeah, we build our walls out of words and pride. Now the cracks run deep where the truth once lied. Screens for temples, code for creed. We worship the lie that feeds our feet. Every echo shake, every thought rehearsed. History written in.
Hello and welcome back. Here we go. Imagine biting into a perfect apple. But the catch is it's in the middle of winter. And it's nice and it's crisp. And it's thousands of miles of where it was grown. And you don't think twice about it. Until someone tells you there's an invisible coating on the skin that's designed to keep it fresh longer. And suddenly, that simple fruit feels different. It feels engineered. So today on Breaking the System, we're looking at the hidden layer between you and your produce. Edible coatings like the one developed by Apeel, that's A-P-E-E-L, Sciences. We'll trace how humanity has always fought to make food last longer, how our global supply chains created new pressures, and why a plant-based spray has sparked such intense debate. There's really no villain, and there's really no hero here. It's just the system as it is. Let's break it open.
The curtains rise, the lights burn bright. You're blinded now, can't see the fight. Smoke and mirrors, they lead the way. Fooling hearts night after day. Welcome to the show, it's all pretend. The smiles, the lies, the perfect end.
All right, so welcome back to Breaking the System. This is episode 59, The Invisible Peel. Oh, right. So what is it actually? What is this stuff? Okay. At its heart, it's technology. It's simple, a thin edible coating made primarily from mono and diglycerides, fatty acids derived from plants. It's sprayed or applied to fruits and vegetables to slow the actual water loss and the oxidation. And the two main reasons that our produce, like our fruits and our vegetables, that it spoils, right? It spoils really fast. So what is the goal of this? Well, the whole goal with almost any food that we eat is to extend the life shelf without things like refrigeration. Okay? And in some cases, maybe we want to reduce waste, and like an extra bonus would be to make it available year-round, to make it more practical in a world where food travels at such vast differences. Okay? And so regulators, I love these regulators. These regulators are awesome. Okay? So these regulators, including the FDA, have reviewed the ingredients and classified the key components as what they call GRAS, G-R-A-S, which is generally recognized as safe for their intended use. Okay? Let's take a breather for a second and let's look at what that means. What is generally recognized as safe? What is GRAS? Well, it is a regulatory term used by the Food Drug Administration, which is the FDA. It is a substance that is considered, or a substance that is considered GRAS if qualified experts agree based on scientific evidence or a long history of use. Well, that's strange because this was just developed not too long ago, so it can't have a long history of use, and there can't be much scientific evidence that's based around this if it hasn't been used very long. Well, let's keep going. So like we said, the two main ways that a substance becomes grass is scientific use. So that's through different studies, toxicology data, and research to support that it's safe for consumption. Similar level of evidence as food additives that go through this whole FDA process or approval, okay? Common uses in food historically that would be considered grass are things like sodium chloride, which is salt, sugar, vinegar, certain spices, baking soda, certain plant extracts and oils, right? Those aren't too bad, okay? So companies can self-determine grass status without mandatory FDA approval. They can notify the FDA, but they aren't required to. That's interesting as well. And so that's why you'll hear sometimes criticism that grass can be a loophole. And remember, when these companies, when these organizations can find a loophole, they're going to use it, okay? So let's talk about when a peel basically got approved. So in 2016, 2017, the company, Appeal Sciences, began submitting grass notices to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Okay? And one of the key notices in 2017 was they've got different samples that they send in, and one was 0007007, and it was reviewed. And so from 2017 and 2019, additional grass notices were submitted for variations of the coating. So different produce uses different formulations. So the one formulation that they have that they would use for, let's say, apples, they would not use and would use something different for, like, let's say, avocados, which is big. Okay, the only difference is on avocados, we can rip the skin off and not eat this stuff. But on an apple, like, you can still do the same thing, but if you want the crisp of the outer peel of the apple, like, you're gonna have to eat this stuff. It's just, there's no way around it. You're gonna have to eat it. And so this was not really approved by the FDA. Around 2017 is when Appeal first became recognized as grass to use on produce, but grass is not a stamp of approval. It's often company driven, not FDA initiated. And I thought that was really interesting. And the other interesting point was that there are multiple different formulas, multiple different variations of this stuff, depending on what type of fruit or vegetable that you're eating. Okay? And so one might affect you and one might not, because it's different formulas, right? So let's keep all that in mind, that the FDA knows that this stuff is out there. It's recognized as grass, but it's not officially approved. It doesn't have the official stamp. So what does this stuff, or what does the peel look like? Okay, so let's switch over here real quick. There we go. So when you go to like Walmart or Sam's or IGA, wherever else, right? Wherever they're selling fruits and vegetables, okay? This is the seal that Appeal places on their fruits and vegetables, right? And of course, you can't tell that it's on there just by looking at the apple, looking at the avocado. You can't tell that anything is there And so you won't know that this stuff is on your food unless there is a sticker telling you. And so like that's a big issue. Okay? It's a huge issue. Okay? Let me switch back here. I got Drippy Dan in here again. Apollo, quit. So historically, this isn't a brand new battle. Humans have been trying to break the natural system of decay since we first started storing surplus foods. Okay? And so like we said, the company behind this is Appeal Sciences, and they've positioned it as a tool to tackle a massive problem. Roughly 30 to 40% of all food produced globally is lost or wasted somewhere between like the farm and the fork when it goes in your mouth. Especially fruits and vegetables. They're extremely vulnerable to this. And so the key issue here is that not everyone sees this as a straightforward solution. Some consumers and critics question the need for any additional processing on fresh food, and they worry about long-term effects of widespread use and call for clearer labeling so shoppers know exactly what they're buying, right? So like which version of this am I buying when I buy an apple? And which version of this am I buying when I buy an avocado or a grape or whatever it is, right? And others point out the similar edible coatings and waxes have existed for decades on conventional produce, yet this newer version has drawn sharper scrutiny. Well, why? Why is this? Okay, so let's take a step back into our historical context real quick, because like we said, this isn't a brand new battle. Humans have been trying to break the natural system of decay since we started storing surplus foods. Ever since the grain, right? And so we go back 12,000 years or more to the Middle East and the early agricultural societies. People, what do? Well, we dried fruits and vegetables, and we put meat in the sun, or put meat in the wind to remove moisture that bacteria and mold would need to grow on. And in hot, dry climates, this worked remarkably well. Well, in colder regions, freezing or ice or snow served as the same purpose, right? That's kind of like a refrigerator or freezer, only it's free. And so ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Romans heavily salted their fish and their meat, not just for flavor, but because the salt draws out the water and creates an environment hostile to spoilage. You ever had like beef jerky? It's kind of what that is. Or like a fruit roll-up. It's kind of the same thing. It's the same idea, right? We dry it out, kind of preserves it so it stays edible for a little longer. So fermentation emerged as another clever hack, turning cabbage into things like sauerkraut or milk into yogurt and cheese, allowed communities to preserve nutrition through seasons when fresh food was scarce. Sugaring fruits in honey or making preserves did the same. And by the late 1700s and early 1800s, Nicolas Appert in France developed canning, sealing food in jars and heating them, which helped Napoleon's army and later transformed global trade. How many of us out there have ever canned before? Like, it's kind of easy to do. And so, like, we have a garden, and so we can all of our green beans. Sometimes we will can things like squash or zucchini. I've even heard that you can can meat. I've never tried it. I've never done it. But I've heard you can do it. Okay. So canning is a viable option. And so the Industrial Revolution brought mechanical refrigeration and freezing. That's pretty nice, right? We want something with pop open the fridge, it's there. We want a pizza, open up the freezer, and it's right there. Okay. That came about during the Industrial Revolution. And so Clarence Birdside's quick freezing method in the early 20th century made frozen produce taste far better than slow frozen versions. And wax coatings on fruits like apples and citrus became common in the 20th century to mimic the natural protective skin that gets damaged during things like the harvesting, when we're picking, and in the shipping, all of the bumping and, on the crates and going from here to there. So throughout history, every major leap in food preservation was driven by the same pressures that we face today. Feeding more people, surviving seasons or journeys, and to reduce that loss. So what changed dramatically in the last century is scale. Our food system shifted from mostly local and seasonal eating to a global network expecting perfect looking strawberries in like February, and avocados available 365 days out of the year. And so that expectation creates new vulnerabilities and new technologies to address them. Full stop for a second, okay? Because we have to be critical. We have to ask ourselves these questions. Do we want to make a thing that we spray on our food, some type of chemical to preserve it, and maybe poison ourselves? Not saying that a peel is poisoning, but it's always that critical thinking that we have to ask. So by making this stuff, are we poisoning ourselves? Or can we just not eat avocados 365 days out of the year? Okay. For those of us that have a garden, and when it becomes harvesting season, there's just something that is so good about a fresh strawberry from the garden, or a fresh tomato right off the vine, right outside your backyard. There's just something about the taste and the quality, and it's just so much better than buying the exact same thing from IGA or Walmart or Aldi's or wherever. Okay? And have we become almost too complacent on food and expecting that we can eat whatever we want, whenever we want, 365 days out of the year? I don't know. Maybe we should go back to the drawing board on this, and maybe we should expect that we aren't able to eat certain foods at certain times of the year. I don't know. I'm just throwing out critical thinking questions instead of throwing another chemical into the food process that we eat. Look at the uptick in things like obesity because of all the sugar that we've been adding and all the salt that we've been adding. Look at the uptick in all the cancers that we've been having because of this type of oil and this type of preservative and this type of thing that we're doing into our foods, right? We're doing this to ourselves. And I'm not saying that Appeal is doing this. I'm leaving that up to you. I'm saying, do we need to take a step back and look at what we're doing? And, maybe we don't need avocados 365 days out of the year. Maybe we don't need strawberries in February. It's nice. It's really nice. But do we need it? Okay. On we go. In today's version of plant-derived coating designed specifically for that long-distance, high-expectation supply chain, proponents argue it attacks food waste at its root, helping produce survive the transit and to stay fresher on store shelves and to last longer in your refrigerators. In theory, less waste means more efficient use of things like the land and water and energy that's already been poured into growing that food. It could even support farmers in regions with limited cold chain infrastructure. So maybe their summers aren't as hot and they can only grow certain things. So critics counter that we've eaten fresh fruits for thousands of years without synthetic-looking interventions. They raise fair questions about transparency. How is it clearly labeled? Which we said in the beginning of the show, right? What about long-term consumption data on these specific formulations at scale? We don't know. Some prefer returning to simpler systems, things like local farmers markets, seasonal eatings, accepting imperfect or shorter-lived produce, arguing that technology like this props up globalized models rather than fixing underlying issues like overproduction or consumer habits. And that's a big one. The imperfection, that's kind of stupid because we do that to ourselves. Look at McDonald's. There are certain potatoes that McDonald's will not accept because it's not perfect. Because it's got this little blemish on it or this little blemish or it's not the right color, right? That's from McDonald's. That's just one company from one food that we eat, and they don't accept imperfections. Look at that on a global scale, right? It's horrible, the amount of stuff that we throw away or that we don't use because maybe the apple isn't red enough, or maybe the banana is just a little bit green, or whatever, right? It's kind of bad, but we do it. We do it to ourselves because we're humans. And there have been public flare-ups in 2025. High-profile figures express concerns tying the technology to broader influences and safety questions, only for some claims to be walked back as inaccurate. So some of those claims are inaccurate, right? That's why we have to do our research. The company has pushed back against what it calls widespread misinformation, emphasizing that the ingredients are food-based and that early funding included research grants, not ongoing control. So why is it not approved by FDA? And is another question, look at the FDA. Look at all of the stuff that they said, that's perfectly healthy for you, eat that. And then we eat it, and then we get some type of cancer, or we get obese, or we get some type of whatever, right? Because the FDA has approved it because the chemicals within that one food fits within the dietary guidelines. It doesn't take into consideration that you're eating a multitude of other foods within the day or within the month or within the year that also have those chemicals in them. And so when you add all of that up, you're no longer within the dietary guidelines of those chemicals. And that's why we have like these super turbo cancers and right, and all of these people that are on these different pills for high blood pressure and for diabetes and for this and that and the other, because we're doing this to ourselves. Okay? So if this company wants to push back, I ask again, why is it not FDA approved? Just approve it. Get it approved, right? And if there's multiple different variations of this, then every single variation should be approved. Okay? We have someone chatting with us. Awesome. We are talking about a peel made by Bill Gates, might I add, and there are a lot of people that don't like anything that Bill Gates has to do with, right? How did Bill Gates get to be famous? He made computers. He made computer chips, right? What does that have to do with food, right? There's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of questions that I have about Bill Gates, and that is a whole other rabbit hole onto its own. So don't even get me started on that, man. But why is Bill Gates putting his nose in our dietary guidelines of food when he has nothing to do with it? And he's also got his nose in a lot of other stuff that he shouldn't be a part of. And so, like, for me, personally, that is a red flag, right? And so you personally have to think about these things, okay? So meanwhile, some retailers and consumers have simply chosen to avoid treated produce, voting with their wallets for untreated options. I know my wife and I personally, we buy a lot of our fruits and vegetables as much as we can locally. So in the spring and the summertime, we have a local farmer's market, and we buy a lot of our squash and green beans and stuff that our garden can't produce when we want it. We buy it locally from local farmers that don't use any pesticides whatsoever. And that's really nice. So if you have that within your community, that's awesome that you could use that. If you don't, maybe go to a town board meeting. Try to set that up, right? To where you can have something that is fresh, right? Otherwise, we go to like Aldi's before we ever go to a big box store like Walmart or Sam's Club or Target, like a Super Target or anything like that. Because a lot of those companies buy locally or will go to IGA. And she's really big on checking labels. Like she has, I don't know what app it is, but so she has an app on her phone that she uses, and it scans and it rates that food, not only your fruits and your vegetables, but like basically anything. It rates that food on 0 to 100. 0 being bad, 100 being as best as it can possibly be. And so like there's a lot of stuff that she will compare shop, and if it's too low, she doesn't buy it because she knows that it's toxic. It's got too many additives, got too many preservatives. And so like for us personally, we try extremely on the daily not to buy anything that has this on it. Not that we think that it's poisonous, but we just don't want to be adding another potential carcinogen or another potential item, product, whatever you want to call it, into our bodies. If we're eating an apple, we just want to eat an apple. If we're eating grapes, we just want to eat a grape. We don't want to be eating some type of waxy chemical that's derived from some bioengineered plant somewhere where we don't know, right? And that's the other thing is, where's the stuff being made? Is it being made in the United States? Are they outsourcing it? Where are they getting the fruits or vegetables or whatever they are, the oils to make this stuff? Are they sourcing that stuff in from third world countries that maybe throw pesticides and stuff on that plant? That's another thing you have to think about. Where are the chemicals coming from to make this stuff? And if there's a certain type of pesticide that's used for those, you're ingesting some of that along the way. Okay? So these are all critical thinking questions and just critical thinking in general that we have to do when we're talking about food that we're consuming in our bodies. Okay? And so here's our conclusion. So from sun-dried figs in ancient Mesopotamia to refrigerated global shipping containers to today's invisible edible barriers, humanity keeps innovating ways to outpace the spoilage. Each advance solved real problems of its era, like starvation in winter, or spoiled cargo on long voyages, massive economic losses in modern retail, while introducing new trade-offs around things like convenience, naturalness, trust, and choice. And the food preservation system reflects larger tensions between efficiency and simplicity, global abundance and local connection, technological process, and caution about unintended consequences. It doesn't demand that we pick a side. It simply asks us to notice the layer between harvest and plate, and to consider what we value most when we decide what ends up on our table. Because what ends up on our table ends up inside of us. And that is the chemical makeup that makes us up. And so if we can eat healthier, we start to get rid of obesity and diabetes and heart disease and cancers, right? And if we can cut those things out of society as much as possible, then healthcare costs can come down because people aren't spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on their healthcare. It's a win-win. Really, it is. So here's our critical thinking question we're going to leave you guys with tonight, because we always leave you with a critical thinking question, okay? And so jot those comments down in the comment section. I try to comment to everybody as possible now that we're streaming on multiple platforms on multiple times of the day. Okay. If a technology meaningfully reduces food waste and makes fresh produce more accessible year round, but it adds another layer of processing to something humans have eaten in its natural state for millennia, what factors would you personally weigh when deciding whether to embrace it, to avoid it, or to seek a middle path? So, on this subject of appeal, the brand, personally, would you embrace it? Do you eat it? Do you try to avoid it? Or do you try to seek a middle path, which I don't really know what that would be here in this case, because once it's on there, I've heard that you can't wash it off. Like, once it's there, it's there. Okay, the only thing you can do is just peel whatever that fruit or vegetable is. Okay, so that's your first critical thinking question. Are you going to embrace it, or are you going to avoid it, or are you going to logically look for a middle path? And the second critical thinking question is, and how does that choice connect to the kind of food system that you want to support? And that's a big one. Like I've said, for me and my family, we try to eat local as much as possible. Helps the local farmers. It builds character within just the town, the locality, right? You're buying something that's local. You are helping the economy that's local. So, but what do you guys think? What do you do? And with that, this is Breaking the System. I hope you guys enjoyed episode 59. Peace. God bless. Catch you guys next time.
Yeah.